here is the icon of the sport and future Hall of Famer. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome boxing's legendary and only 8-division champion of the world, introducing the one and only Manny Pacquiao.
They invoke the family. He's in trouble and down goes Solis.
Comes with the uppercut, he catches it with his hands. This guy's extraordinary.
It's an absolute clinic that he's putting on right here.
Oh, that eye is bad.
And Margarita now in retreat.
There are a number of metrics by which you can establish the greatness which has been personified in Manny Pacquiao's nearly incredible boxing career.
For the first time in the third round. Beautiful counter shot by Pacquiao.
There's a counter left hand that backed up right another. And Manny Pacquiao going on the attack. Again, the high guard.
In 2008, Oscar De La Hoya and Manny Pacquiao would face off for what was billed as the dream match. And for Manny Pacquiao, it was, because Pac-Man would have a chance to fight his idol, the man who had been his inspiration all the way back when he stood aboard a rickety ship in hopes of landing his first fight at 16. To the public, it was a meeting between the pound-for-pound king, Pacquiao, and the bona fide pay-per-view superstar and legend, Oscar De La Hoya, who was looking for one last run. It was an unexpected crossroads for both athletes, given their age difference and, most notably, their size difference. While he's probably a little underrated today, De La Hoya is an incredibly accomplished fighter with world titles across 6 weight classes, and a resume that's as good as any in the sport. He was an undeniable box office draw who faced serious opposition, matching up with names like Mayweather, Mosley, Julio Cesar Chavez, and Hopkins. A win over De La Hoya would instantly make Manny a household name. Boxing pundits weren't crazy about the fight though, pointing to De La Hoya's massive size advantage. For context, this fight was at 147 pounds. Before this bout, the highest weight Manny had fought for was 135 pounds. He had come in at 130, and he had only jumped up that fight. The matchup would be interesting, as De La Hoya was a natural southpaw who opted for an orthodox stance, leading with his left foot even though he was left-handed. So, the orthodox stance enhanced his sublime jab, one of the best in the sport. He was a tactical aggressor, often reserved in the early rounds. But once he saw an opportunity, he would capitalize in stunning fashion. His pinpoint, powerful jab set the stage for his offense, the true definition of a boxer-puncher. Pac-Man was a natural powerhouse, a southpaw whose game plan was equal parts blazing foot speed and rocket-fueled explosiveness. Unlike De La Hoya, Pacquiao placed his power left hand behind him, and needless to say, he made great use of that. Experts were curious of Pac-Man's foot speed, and unusual angles would keep him safe from Oscar's long, piston-like jab. Many weren't convinced that Manny's power could bother the bigger man. All these would factor in, and under the watchful eye of an excited public, the dream match would serve as an inflection point in the history of boxing. Pacquiao would stand across the ring, prepared to retire his hero. As expected, Oscar tried to jab and bully Pacquiao into the ropes and into corners. In round 1, he clearly demonstrated he had the ability to do so. Using calculated and patient aggression, he pumped out his lead hand and stepped at angles to close off escape routes. But when he did manage to corral Manny against the ropes, Pacquiao slipped and weaved until Oscar overcommitted. He then used the temporary lapse in balance and position to dart away. De La Hoya tried to catch him, but he was always just a bit too slow in turning to line up his shots. Meanwhile, Pac-Man had found he could use one of his favorite attacks, slipping outside to avoid any incoming jabs and throwing a tight straight left to pierce right through the middle of Oscar's guard. Both boxers now had something to worry about. While Pacquiao's counter cross was a powerful weapon, Oscar's strategy could potentially deal much more damage. And he had already proved he could corner Manny in the very first round. Pac-Man's coach, Freddie Roach, the man who had taken a chance on him when no one else would, told Manny to stay off the ropes. Compared with the fight-ending alterations he normally suggested, it was pretty basic advice. But it was certainly the right advice. Pacquiao's solution to this was to rebound and angle off the ropes with a looping left hand.
Get off there, and he gets off by hitting Oscar.
Oscar and De La Hoya look tight.
But beyond this, Manny circled and darted back and forth, so that Oscar had no idea where he would be from one second to the next.
And the hand speed.
Now watch when De La Hoya moves to his left to cut off the ring. That is when Pacquiao charges him. Let the ring be cut off. When Oscar moves to his left, watch and see if Pacquiao then decides that's the time to charge.
He also refused to be backed up by De La Hoya's jab, instead baiting him to punch, so that he could speed up his rhythmic head movement at the last second, making him miss just in time.
Jab. So that stiff left hand and jab, taking it for the head of Manny, and Manny bobbing, weaving, diving, ducking, is not being hit by the jab.
He even baited and countered De La Hoya's jab to cross under it with a lead uppercut, one of the hardest to pull off, but coolest looking counters in boxing.
In and out, and that's exactly the way Manny Pacquiao is fighting right now. There's the uppercut. Straight left hand.
Oscar failed entirely to build on his strategy in the second. Oscar's coach, Nacho Beerstein, who had trained some of the greatest fighters to ever live, admonished him, telling him not to walk in without jabbing and to mix in some body blows. De La Hoya listened and executed, doing much, much better in the third. The Golden Boy doubled, tripled, and even quadrupled up short, half-extended jabs. The faster tempo of attacks meant that Manny was often too preoccupied staying safe to counter or attack himself. The body shots also worked well, being naturally very effective against fighters who like to rely on lateral movement. Because the body is a much bigger target, and of course more stationary than the head, Oscar now had a chance to cut Manny off at the pass.
He's trying to go through the Pacquiao jab and get that right hand in. He's starting to roll up with it now.
Oscar loaded up a couple of shots and both were taken on the back of the...
Body shots take away a fighter's legs over time, but Pacquiao seemed to like this idea too, and started going after De La Hoya's midsection near the end of the round. And this was true in the fourth as well. As strange as it seems, one of Pacquiao's tendencies has always been to try and pay his opponents back by retaliating in the exact same way. Like that one friend that has to one-up every story you tell, Pacquiao refused to let his opponents feel good about their achievements. Each time Oscar landed to the body, Pacquiao immediately returned the favor. Whether this was due to hyper-competitiveness or an actual tactic, it paid off just the same. The way that Pacquiao went from throwing barely any body shots in the first few rounds to adding them to most of his combinations was the straw that broke the camel's back.
He lands as the right hand crisp in the jaw of De La Hoya.
This is a defining round in the fight.
The uppercut. Oscar's having a tough time right now with Manny Pacquiao.
It's a 4-to-1 ratio in power punches.
Oscar was forced to lower his guard, which would uncover his head, or duck and hunch to keep both protected at the same time. But this leveled his head right in front of the power-punching politician's punches. Over the next several rounds, Pacquiao would only build on his advantages, showcasing his unique skill set to perfection against one of the best boxers of his generation. To start, Pacquiao got even better at timing his left, even doubling up. His unique footwork greatly helped him in closing the distance against the taller fighter. Pacquiao would often hop off his front foot for extra space, and this bizarre movement worked to reload his punches, giving extra oomph to the second punch even though it was much shorter than the first. Incredibly, this one counter alone had completely taken away De La Hoya's jab. Pac-Man also dialed in his draws and counters, inviting De La Hoya to punch so that he could duck under and return fire. Compounding the Golden Boy's problems was Pacquiao's ability to suddenly stop circling and change directions to attack, essentially walking him into a weak position. And Pacquiao started adding body shots into the mix, slipping inside to target the stomach. Since body shots naturally draw the guard lower, these punches opened up a lot of potential combinations for Manny. Since Oscar fought with his torso so squared up, it was easy for Manny to use the shot to open or tighten his guard so that he could attack the new opening created with his next punch. Any fighter like Pacquiao who risks throwing more than 3 punches in a row can expect a counter, but Manny would use his footwork to change angles so often that De La Hoya, who liked to fight coming forward, never had time to set down and throw.
To the body with any viciousness at all. And look at Manny. Look at the amount of punches he's throwing there.
And the punch for him.
Oscar's left eye closing up with that jab and the left hand following it. And now here he tries it for Oscar. Even when he opens up, Pacquiao is landing more shots.
Oscar did land a few beautiful counters, using his longer range to swat around Pacquiao's jab. But just like with the body shots, each time De La Hoya scored, Pacquiao came back with an increased tempo.
Yeah, in this fight.
In losing efforts to Bernard Hopkins, to Mayweather, twice to Shane Mosley, and Felix Trinidad, he didn't look this bad.
De La Hoya had cannons that he needed to place into position, but Pacquiao could shoot off rapid-fire machine gun shots from any place and any time. By round 7, Pacquiao was backing De La Hoya up and landing the large majority of his punches.
Pacquiao continues to bounce around, up on his toes, and he's been this way into this fight. Oscar again tentative with the... Oscar not getting off right hands.
Has out-fought Oscar De La Hoya in the power department by a ratio of about 3-to-1. You know, he knows it, but whether you get the body to do that, whether you take advantage of those split-second opportunities is a different story.
Left hand, so what does Pacquiao do? He cracks him with the right hand. He's working on that left eye.
At first, Manny actually seemed incredulous, but he pressed forward anyways. When Oscar allowed himself to be bullied into a corner, the normally unshakable pressure fighter appeared even more surprised. Perhaps Pacquiao suspected a trap, or maybe it was hard to believe that he had attained the skill level to just pulverize the man he had admired for so long. But after taking a moment to collect himself, Manny pressed forward. The veteran boxer tried to escape, but needed to reach out and steady himself on the ropes. Pacquiao easily cut him off and went right back to work. De La Hoya put up his guard and bit down on his mouthpiece, staring defeat in the face, but soldiering on nonetheless. After eating an entire fight's worth of punches in under a minute, the Golden Boy finally got off the ropes. Pacquiao pursued until the tail end of the round.
Back up against the ropes, and Manny's on the assault. La Hoya. And he nailed him with the right hand. He's all over him right now. Oscar's hurt.
When De La Hoya came back from the dead, charging forward to give whatever he had left, but Pacquiao stopped him with a single jab. To the astonishment of all, himself included, Pacquiao's golden idol had melted under the intense heat of his offensive fire. While many expected the fight called then and there, the respect for De La Hoya's championship pedigree convinced those involved to let him have one round to prove he was still in the fight. Through the round, Oscar was outpaced, outboxed, and outpositioned, but he never stopped moving forward and fighting his way off the ropes. For his part, Manny seemed to stick to thudding body shots, maybe hoping to leave the boxer he had looked up to so much as undamaged in the long term as possible.
Miraculous move on Oscar De La Hoya. As I say that, Pacquiao pours the pressure on him, and this might be the miraculous finish of the career.
Once more, De La Hoya surged forward with a final flurry, the last of his career. And once again, he stayed on his feet, if barely, when Pacquiao threw his well-deserved final barrage.
Don't mess with this guy. And the power shots are right downstairs. And look at Pacquiao battle to the end of the 8th round, trying to stop us.
It was a fitting last round for a great champion who had never ducked a fight and never disappointed, win or lose.
It's all over. The fight is stopped. An upset, a huge upset. A tremendous victory for Manny Pacquiao.
After the fight, Manny expressed to De La Hoya that he was still his idol. De La Hoya responded, "No, now you're mine." The Golden Boy retired after this bout and focused full-time on Golden Boy promotions. As he exited boxing's limelight, Pacquiao was there to take his place atop the Vegas marquees and world title main events. It was a true passing of the torch in the unique way that only boxing can deliver. 3 belts on the line. 2 of the most fearsome champions to ever lace up gloves. And one night that would prove who was the better fighter. When Manny Pacquiao and Juan Manuel Marquez agreed to pit their skills against each other in a championship unification bout, little did they know that it would be the beginning of one of the greatest rivalries in boxing. Up there with Ali versus Frazier, or Sugar Ray Robinson versus Jake LaMotta. In some ways, both men were very similar, and in some ways, they couldn't be further apart. Both men had a lot of pride in their countries, and vice versa. Manny was the pride of the Philippines, and Marquez the pride of Mexico. Both men had grown up in bad neighborhoods, and had found their purpose and their living in boxing. Despite the financial incentive, both men seemed to be true warriors at heart, reveling in the thrill of the fight. However, the two could not be further apart on how they went about it. Pacquiao was a high-volume pressure fighter. His punching output alone could overwhelm his opponents, resulting in death by 1,000 cuts. Despite his endless torrent of blows, his punches never lacked power. And of course, there was Pacquiao's left hand, which seemed to have otherworldly power. Combined with his bizarre angles and nuanced lead hand, crafted with the help of coach Freddie Roach, Pacquiao had garnered a reputation as a force of nature, a boxer to be respected and feared. Marquez was the rare kind of skilled counterpuncher who could lead just as easily as follow. Not only did he antagonize his opponents into overcommitting by constantly probing and picking at them using in and out footwork, but he loved to goad them into long, intense exchanges. Marquez was sheer grit and will. The kind of boxer who preferred to put himself and his opponent into dangerous situations. Because he knew when the cards were down, it was his competitor who would be dealt the bad hand and fold. Understandably, the fight gained a lot of interest, and not because there was yet any heated rivalry between the two. If anything, fans were complaining at the lack of trash talk and the downright respectful, immaculate conduct of each fighter.
Marquez, he trained hard, and he won't lead his countryman down, and me too. I want them to. I don't want to disappoint my countrymen.
Instead, the interest came from the fearsome reputation of the two warriors, and the hopeful imaginings of what would happen when these berserk but crafty titans of the sport met inside of the ring. The pressure fighter and the aggressive counterpuncher would pit their two iconic styles against each other. It was anyone's guess what would happen. As most expected, fans did not need to wait long to see some action. Just halfway through the first round, Pacquiao landed a solid 1-2. Sending Marquez flying so hard to the canvas that he slid to a stop. Marquez was up right away, and Pacquiao went in for the kill. Marquez kept his cool and threw well-placed counters, but even so, he was sent tumbling to the floor once again only 20 seconds later. Like so many others, Marquez had been entirely unprepared for the ridiculous speed and insane distance of Pacquiao's rear hand. Pacquiao pulled these off in part by leaning far forward, driving his face directly into Marquez's lead hand, but betting that he was good enough to just slip the punch, even as he threw with full force. And while it's not clear if this was a built-in feature or a happy accident, Pacquiao's jab set up his left very well on both knockdowns by either pulling or knocking Marquez's rear hand out of the way. Regardless, Marquez once again got up. So composed, he appeared completely unfazed. Pacquiao looked once more to end the night early, but astonishingly, he didn't have to chase Marquez, who stood toe-to-toe with him and threw bombs. But for all his bravery, Marquez did seem unsteady, and he was soon clinging to the ropes, where Pacquiao nailed him to the canvas with one final cross. But Marquez was a man of focus, commitment, and sheer Mexican will. Not only did he rise up to his feet, he spent the remainder of the round swinging for the fences. He even landed some well-placed counters before the bell sounded the end of the round. Marquez had survived, but no one could have expected what happened next. Round 2 started off with a bang, Pacquiao partially connecting with his first left and then stepping full force into his second, which missed. But then, Marquez countered, slamming a hard rear uppercut to the body and flowing right into another rear uppercut to the chin. Now it was Pacquiao's turn to back off. Manny's tendency to crouch at close range made it relatively easy for a skilled counterpuncher like Marquez to find his mark. His punches were still finding a home, but then, so were Marquez's. And so he punished Pacquiao, pounding shovel hooks into his exposed sides and intercepting his ducks with uppercuts. Despite this, Pac-Man's cross was still landing with enough consistency and power to make it hard for anyone to give the round to Marquez. The Mexican's parries were landing him counters when he timed them right. However, he was rarely able to get that timing as perfect as it needed to be. But all of that changed in the third, when Marquez stopped planting down and instead circled away every time Pacquiao tried to close the distance. This gave him the space and angle he needed for his parry to work. The primary threat greatly lessened. Marquez could pick his spots to throw riskier counters off of head movement. Rather than the swift conclusion to the first round's battle that Pacquiao had been looking for, it seemed that this was only the beginning of a much greater war. Over the next several rounds, Marquez almost completely neutralized Pacquiao's offense and dealt out a lot of damage while doing so. Marquez's ability to turn with Pacquiao and stay sharp under fire helped him to follow Manny as he tried to disengage. He would even shift into southpaw to catch him when he tried to exit the exchange. And while Juan was busy degrading Pacquiao's angular movement with brutal body shots, he somehow still found the time to set up hard lead hook counters. The Filipino's offense now blunted, Marquez started building on his own offense. He used a simple strategy as old as boxing itself. He would alternate between throwing rear body hooks and rear head hooks, making it difficult for Pacquiao to discern where Marquez's looping haymakers were going. In the 6th, a head hook rocked Pacquiao, who retreated to the ropes. As unlikely as it was, Marquez was evening out the scorecard, erasing Pacquiao's first 3-round knockdowns. And more importantly, he was dealing major damage. Things were looking exceedingly bad for the esteemed champion. But in round 7, the fight took another unexpected turn. Roach advised Pacquiao to double jab before throwing his rear hand. Roach has a long history of pulling fighters out of the fire, even giving MMA great GSP crucial corner advice that led to a knockout. But after the Filipino champion again got countered immediately after executing Roach's plan, it was up to him to take back the fight. And so, Pacquiao began to counter Marquez's counters, lengthening the already lengthy exchanges until he paid Marquez back with interest. Even though Pacquiao often took a hard shot first, he seemed to have decided that he would get the last word of the fistic argument. For the first time in several rounds, Marquez was no longer in total control of the fight. Manny's strategy seemed untenable in the long term, or at the least, very unwise. But there was a method to Pacquiao's madness. He had never actually given up on defense. He had just fought on anyways if it failed. And over the next few rounds, he got much better at anticipating and timing Marquez's counters, meaning that he could execute the same strategy from the 7th while taking much less damage. He mostly relied on in-and-out footwork from mid-range. He would attack from a reasonable distance, evade Marquez's counter, and then, if possible, step back in again. His head movement and high guard kept him safe when his footwork wasn't enough. At the same time, he gave Marquez's direct offense much more respect than before, backing up and circling away rather than constantly pressing forward. It had taken several rounds, but now both men had learned to respect the other's talent. During the breaks, Marquez's coach warned him to keep his hands up, then begged him not to lose any more rounds. Going into the 10th, it was once again Marquez's turn to take back the fight. Marquez put in the work in the next round, following Pacquiao when he tried to angle out of exchanges and throwing endless combinations. For all that, Pacquiao proved to have surprisingly great defensive head movement. And the round was hard to call. So too was the next round, although Marquez seemed to be getting the better of Pacquiao more often. The pressure fighter's reduced work rate leaving him open to counters. That said, the judges really had their work cut out for them trying to decide which rounds went to which fighter. Any veterans of the sport must have known that everything would most likely come down to the 12th and very last round. Both men fought hard, and both men landed. But Pacquiao seemed to have more left in the tank. He was ultimately landing the sharper, harder shots of the round. But Marquez was always dangerous. The seconds counted down. Both men still looking for a knockout. 30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds. And then the bell sounded the end of the fight. The two embraced and then eagerly awaited the judge's decision. The first judge scored it 115 to 110 for Pacquiao. The second scored it 115 to 110 for Marquez. And the third scored it 113 to 113 for a split decision. Now, the last judge had accidentally not counted one of Pacquiao's knockdowns on his scorecards, and his oversight inadvertently set in motion one of the greatest rivalries in sports history. These two gladiators would fight 3 more times, each fight just as exciting and inspiring as the first. Once in a generation, a boxer does something so incredible, so spectacular, that it will be talked about for centuries to come. In 2010, Manny "Pac-Man" Pacquiao would attempt such a feat. Pacquiao had been on an unprecedented tear through multiple divisions.
Yes, he did.
And when you see a guy fall face first, you know he's neurologically, he's scrambling. Oh, yeah.
Nice movement from Cotto to avoid those shots. He's down again.
If he defeated Antonio Margarito, the fearsome #1 contender known as the Tijuana Tornado, he would attain a vacant super welterweight belt and become the first man in history to earn a belt in 8 weight classes. When Manny began his career, he had been around 105 pounds. He would now fight at 154. Although in truth, he would come into the fight much lighter. He had made the difficult decision to go against his longtime trainer and stop bulking up, sure that his speed would be a far more valuable weapon than any extra muscle. Now on the night, he was giving up nearly 20 pounds to Margarito. He had better be right, because the Tornado was no one to be trifled with. Not only did Margarito enjoy a huge height, weight, and reach advantage, he was also a 3-time world champion with a dark history. Margarito had been suspended from boxing for 1 year over a controversy involving loaded gloves, which many believe held a substance similar to plaster of Paris. Margarito's fans hoped this fight could become his redemption, his detractors, his punishment. Both men now stood ready. It was time to witness history. The fight began, and Pacquiao shocked everyone by standing right in front of Margarito, squared up and upright. Half the time he took the larger man's punches on his gloves, catching and throwing back. He would reinforce his cover blocks with his parries, then blend the motion of his parry into his return punch. The rest of the time, he used head movement to evade and land counters.
Left of the body, right to the head by Pacquiao.
The taller man was forced to punch down, opening up his body and putting his head within reach of Pacquiao's blinding fast combinations.
That's the way he's fighting his game plan perfectly.
Not much of a tornado for in that round.
So far, Pacquiao's speed and stellar defense were negating Margarito's vast reach and size advantages. Still in question was the power factor. If Manny could take shots and stay standing, and if his own punches would hurt enough to command Margarito's respect. In the second, Pacquiao kept up the counters, but also felt comfortable enough to take the lead at times, igniting rapid-fire combinations that targeted any small crack in Margarito's armor with tremendous precision and accuracy.
It's so noticeable, the hand speed, isn't it?
No matter who's doing it. Beautiful combinations by Manny Pacquiao.
But Manny's aggression, coupled with his refusal to back down, gave Margarito the opportunity to finally land some big punches. Pacquiao was landing multiple punches for every one that his foe connected with, but the sheer size difference made the discrepancy in power akin to a rapier versus a two-handed greatsword.
Not showing now. Now, he's got to watch himself getting in close. Boy, you're right. The crowd is at a high pitch.
It's a frenzy.
I thought another good round for Pacquiao.
I get it.
Pacquiao changed it up for the third, perhaps because he felt he had proven his point that he could hang with the bigger man, or perhaps because hanging with the bigger man had cost him more than he had let on. He reverted back to his usual lateral footwork and deep angle head movement. His feet were so fast that he could step around to circumvent Margarito's guard before he had time to reposition. Margarito plodded forward at a steady pace, taking punches that had knocked out Pacquiao's former competitors with confidence. Though his head whipped back repeatedly, he did not slow one bit, seemingly assured that Pacquiao did not possess the power to really hurt him. The two exchanged crosses, and Margarito just put on a smug grin. He kept up the pressure, his superior reach aiding his well-placed shots, driving Manny to the ropes. But as of yet, he couldn't keep him there.
Those hands are slow, but those hands are heavy.
Yes, they are.
That chin is solid. So it's definitely a tough customer, and he's got a lot of heart.
And again, the way that head's bouncing around him, look at the way he's operating.
I think that one hurt him.
Round 4 turned out to be explosive. Pacquiao seemed to abandon his lateral movement and went back to standing right in front of Margarito. As a direct result, Margarito was easily able to drive Pacquiao to the ropes. But then, rather than fire off more tight combinations, Pacquiao swung for the fences, putting everything he had into his punches. So far, the smaller man had been keeping his body motion short and compact, economy of motion being the key to throw punches in bunches. Until now, Margarito kept trying to hit even as Pacquiao escaped, but he now had an entirely different look on his face. Perhaps it was right then that Margarito understood what kind of power Manny could bring when he fully committed. But just because Margarito understood the situation better, didn't mean he was deterred. He kept marching forward as Pacquiao unloaded, like a man trudging through a gale force hurricane.
Beautiful display for Pacquiao. Margarito has done nothing to take advantage of his height, his reach. At this point, it's a glorified sparring match.
And eventually, he reached the eye of the storm. Pacquiao calmed down, and Margarito took his turn. He put pressure on by upping his punch volume, then stepped into southpaw to block off Pacquiao's escape, placing a hard uppercut cross combination through his guard. But just as it started to look as if Margarito was indestructible and that Pacquiao had moved up too far in weight, Pacman landed a thudding liver blow at the tail end of his combination. His body straights enticed Margarito to tighten his guard, creating the perfect vulnerability for Pacquiao to target. The champion's legs turned to rubber, and Pacquiao pieced him up, backing the relative Goliath up and forcing a full-on retreat for the first time in the bout.
He might be ready to drop
He
it.
could be. And that is a really bad cut, Colonel. Yeah, he is beat up.
Normally, this would have been the beginning of the end, but Margarito found his courage and surged forward at the very end of the round. With his size, he didn't have to land nearly as much as Pac-Man to end the night. Although it now appeared as if Manny was in control, he was walking a tightrope, with no one to catch him if he fell.
End of round 4.
Size not meaning anything. It's not the size, it's the skill level, and Pacquiao's got that in spades.
once again, the fight took on a different dynamic in the 5th. Manny now circled the ring, focusing on one-shotting and countering. It was now Margarito who decided to throw rapid-fire combinations, tearing apart Manny's guard to create and capitalize on openings. More than perhaps anyone had suspected, this fight hinged on both men's mastery of the high guard, not only on who could best adjust the placement of their own guard to better defend shots, but also who could find openings through and around their opponent's guard to place their own shots. As the round went on, Pacquiao seemed more and more adept at deciding when to just prod at Margarito and when to throw with authority, saving his best shots for when he knew he would hit clean. However, Manny still had no good reply to Margarito's uppercuts, which came up from underneath his line of sight to sneak through his guard. The round came to a close with Pacquiao dominating.
Fantastic Manny to me.
Absolutely does. And he's just so sharp. I don't know what you could say.
It's a clinic.
But as ridiculous as it seemed with all his success, his task was so monumental that he would have to make adjustments if he hoped to remain conscious. Round 6 looked like what most probably imagined the fight would look like. Pacquiao displayed close to the full extent of his footwork speed, landing unorthodox counters before darting out in the opposite direction. Once Pac-Man got the Tijuana Tornado chasing him, he would stop short to unload, or even change direction entirely, sometimes while countering. At this range and with this movement, he could avoid Margarito's uppercuts. However, his body shot still had the range to dig into Pacquiao's sides, catching the Filipino legend as he moved out and stifling his lateral movement. And for Margarito, the strategy came to fruition with only 30 seconds left in the round. He perfectly placed a hard counter hook underneath Pacquiao's jab. The blow thudded into his kidney. Pacquiao fought on, but Margarito shoveled a second blow into Pacquiao's liver just a moment later. Manny Pacquiao went down. Almost. He rebounded off the ropes and desperately circled out, his lead hand held low to prevent a fight-ending third shot. He clapped his gloves and taunted Margarito. Margarito obliged.
Hit him a pretty good shot.
But Manny proved resilient, keeping his right arm pinned to his side and fighting one-handed against the ropes.
Yeah. And now Pacquiao fighting off.
Unbelievably, it was Margarito who backed up, and Pacquiao unloaded with the rage of a wounded animal until the bell sounded the end of the round. Margarito probably expected Manny to come out to the 7th with little left to give. Being an experienced professional boxer, he would understand just how much a bad liver blow can slow a fighter down. But in fact, the 7th was Manny's best round so far. He flew across the ring, remaining safe while using angles to decimate the taller man's guard. He mercilessly tore into Margarito, darting back and forth like a hummingbird and stinging him from all directions like a swarm of angry wasps.
Pacquiao just pot-shotting him now.
Colonel scorecard, got Pacquiao pitching a shutout, 60-60.
Margarito still had his moment when he caught Manny on the ropes. But as it turned out, Pac-Man would find an answer to this very serious problem in the 8th. As crazy as it seems, in the 8th, Pacquiao planted himself on the ropes and stayed there, betting that his guard would be all it took to keep him safe. And incredibly, he was right. Although he took some minor damage here or there, Pac-Man was able to deflect most of the shots off of his forearms or elbows, turning with Margarito's punches to take some of the sting off. Few things weaken a man like getting punched repeatedly, And Margarito had weakened enough to where Pacquiao no longer feared his power. He not only stopped or smothered most of Margarito's blows, he fought back, turning the tables and forcing the determined but battle-worn boxer to retreat. The strategy wasn't foolproof, and there were times when Manny seemed more tired than comfortable. But still, Margarito's best strategy now seemed to have been rendered untenable.
Hasn't done enough because Pacquiao's had an answer for everything he's thrown at him. Beautiful counter shot by Margarito. Pacquiao with lefts and rights.
Here's the warrior Pacquiao. He chooses to stay in the corner. Where does the energy come from? Wow!
It's remarkable.
So going into the ninth, Margarito seemed to have little hope of victory, and perhaps some hope of surviving. Although he kept moving forward, the Mexican champion looked as if he were trying to achieve the world record for most punches taken in a professional boxing match.
But he just took from Manny Pacquiao and kept coming. Pacquiao now gets out of there.
The right eye, rather.
He just took about 5 shots. Oh, and another beautiful shot from Manny Pacquiao. It was an uppercut.
I stopped the fight after this round. He can't win it, and no sense of him taking any more head blows. They should stop the fight.
Pacquiao wobbled him near the end of the 10th with the hard counter hook, and Margarito probably only made it through the round because the bell was not far off.
And that can be dangerous later in life.
And you hope he survives the round, and then they stop it. That's it. And I hope that's real.
After literally dozens of unanswered punches in the 11th, Manny looked to the ref. Pacquiao was a martial artist who idolized and imitated figures like Bruce Lee since he was a child, not an egomaniac who enjoyed hurting people who were already defeated. But the ref allowed the massacre to continue. Although Margarito could never hope to redeem himself in the eyes of many, he did prove in this fight he was a brave boxer who had no quit in him. And as the bell sounded the end of the fight, Pacquiao had nothing left to prove. Regardless of what happened from here on out, the man who had begun his boxing journey as a 16-year-old stowed away on a rickety ship, hoping to land a fight so that he could afford food, had now become an 8-division world champion, and cemented his place as one of the greatest boxers in history. If you would like to learn more about the sweet science, you can check out my books on footwork, power, and defense, linked below. From the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.